Coming up today on Locked On at Texas Tech, it's March, it's postseason basketball time, and a green flame assault already being waged on the LBK. Baylor fitting the description of the next potential victim.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Great to be with you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day, always free and available on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. And today's episode brought to you by TurboTax, ready for stress-free taxes and the most money back guaranteed. If you are, head to TurboTax.com today and get matched with your expert. With the only Chris Level, I'm Casey Cowan. Chris, great to be back with you. Chris joining us from Kansas City because it's Big 12 tourney time. We'll get to who that will involve or who not, as far as, of course, the availability report is concerned. That's been a running topic throughout the season, as it can be for a lot of teams by this point in the year. And the matchup as well, an intriguing one, Chris. I got to say I was kind of rooting for this, just thought it'd be a little bit more interesting as far as these conference tournament matchups go with the Baylor Bears. So looking forward to it, man. And we've already seen some exciting basketball, some improbable results from Kansas City. March is in the air. There's no doubt about that. So looking forward to the Red Raiders turn coming up today.
Yeah, Colorado wins one of their first 19 Big 12 games, and then they decide to go and win three in a row to end the regular season, and then two in KC. Wild how March can treat different teams, but yeah, the Red Raiders are going to get a really good Bears team, and I think you obviously won the regular season matchup in Lubbock, but this is going to be a different Baylor team that you see tonight that you saw in Lubbock, namely because of VJ Edgecombe, who is going to be probably a top 5 pick in the draft come June. So, and he went for 19 and 10 last night against Kansas State. So this will be a tough one, but yeah, looking forward to it.
So how do you think that kind of changes maybe what was there for Texas Tech in order to be successful the first time around, or doesn't? Because I think, on occasion you kind of get a piece here or there, not all as talented as Mr. Edgecombe, but sometimes you get late into a season, Chris, and like Texas Tech has experienced previously as well, you kind of figure out a groove or whatever it might be here or there, and then you have a piece come back in, and maybe he is a talented guy, but it doesn't quite fit at that time of year in the way that you would hope. Not suggesting that's necessarily the case here, but how do you think that maybe adjusts sort of the way the matchup was tilting the first time around?
Yeah, I think they are this is a scarier group to try to guard than what you saw the first go round. That they are missing. So what's happened is Edgecombe is available and will play tonight, and then Langston Love, who has been a key piece for that Bears program for the last 2 or 3 years, has just battled a variety of different injuries. He didn't play against you in Lubbock either, and he's kind of a role player, but another physical guard that's got some experience. And so you enter those guys in the equation, but what you take away is Josh Ojanawa, who is their one. He's kind of like their Federico or their JT Toppin to a certain extent, and they're one big that had any experience, and so they're much smaller. The bigs that they will play tonight are much younger. They're freshmen. Asamoah and Dubravkovic, I believe is how you say it. And they're just a few minutes here or there type guys. But you have two of the best power forwards, I guess, in the Big 12, if not the country, going against each other tonight in Norshad Omier and then JT Toppin, because JT did not have a great game against these guys the first go round. Just 8-8. It was somewhat modest, but that's kind of the matchup right there that I think will I don't want to say determine this thing, but like which one of those two doesn't stay out or stays out of foul trouble? Which one of those two, is better than the other, or do they simply cancel each other out? But this is going to be a game where you can win on the glass again, because that's what's tricky to say that because Omer is an elite rebounder. I mean, he's got 20 double doubles this year, something like 88 in his career. I mean, it's like he's setting an NCAA record. I think every time he gets another one. But this there's a lot of athleticism, and they're going to put four guards out there. They're going to be difficult to guard, I think. And so, where are you at with that? That's a great question. And is it how much confidence do they have after just really handling Kansas State fairly easily last night? I don't know.
Vibe check time. I know you've been with the team and you guys have been taking in the sights in Kansas City. So what's the feel as far as, everybody kind of shows up to this thing as we've discussed to a great extent leading up to it. Everybody comes into this thing with kind of a different type of urgency or whatever way you want to describe it, I guess. So what are you feeling from Coach McCaslin and company as we hit tip off?
Well, they will not hold anything back. I think Grant will have them and try to explain to them and has, how important this is and to compete and all the stuff. And there's the thought that it's tricky when you're, because there's people will say this often. The first games at these tournaments are the trickiest for these teams. And does Baylor having a bit of an advantage because they've already got one under their belt and they've kind of got their, maybe in rhythm a bit? I don't know. That didn't seem to bother them last night against Kansas State, who also had a game under their belt.
True.
But I would expect a few hiccups early with Texas Tech because they kind of feel the crowd out and and you could be the team that everybody in the stands from a neutral observer is rooting against. I mean, that's the thing is like when you show up to these buildings and your people will root for you, but anybody rooting for an upset that's just a casual observer, they start rooting for the underdog. I mean, or if it benefits their team on the other side of the bracket. Now that's Arizona or Kansas is what awaits the winner of tonight's first quarterfinal game at 6 o'clock between these two teams we're talking about. But yeah, I mean, I think that I don't think anybody consciously is going, "Hey, let's just kind of ease into this," or let's try to not
Right.
go for it. I just think that's a
65%,
tricky.
everybody. Let's go 65%.
Yeah, I just don't think that's not how Grant rolls, and that's not. You can't flip that switch because you can't turn it off and then ask them to turn it back on. So you'll if you lose tonight, it's just because Baylor was better or hotter or whatever it may be. But I'm curious to see what we get from the Red Raiders tonight because I don't ultimately know win or lose if it affects your seed much next week. It could. It could bump you down a few spots here or there, but I just and again, part of this is because that's why it's probably in a way good that Baylor won because if it were to not go well, I think they're like in the net, they're like 28th in the country. So this would be like a quad one loss or a quad one win. So it's not gonna
Gotcha.
tilt it just too terribly much. But again, I think you're here to try to win, and that's what you'll try to do tonight against again a Baylor team that's pretty scary on paper to try to guard.
Yeah, I was curious to check in with you on. There've been a few results, obviously, since we last kind of discussed maybe what would be at stake this week with the win or a loss, and of course, at that time we didn't really know what the matchup might be. Speculated it could be this, so sounds like you kind of are still in that sort of similar pattern, but maybe even more so now where there's very little potential movement with a win or a loss against a team like Baylor, but let's go ahead and get out there and get a win. I say 100%, not 65.
Yeah, and I think I'm just talking about Big 12 tournament stuff, but like I think what's happened to this point here in KC
First, today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. And when the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. And FanDuel's live betting feature electrifies every moment. Whether backing your team for a late-game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch shot, you're never going to miss your chance to get in on the action. Plus, the app, easy to use. And when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet hits. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. And make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA.
I think Baylor could have moved up like a seed line from like maybe being an 11 to like firmly on the 10 line because of
Yeah.
their win over Kansas State. I think West Virginia could have been on that 10 line and dropped to an 11. I think there was a lot of chatter about these Bears coming into this deal where they may get sent to Dayton in that first four scenario. I don't know if that was reality or not, but that's what a lot of folks that project this stuff kind of felt like they were in that range. And I think they're now off of that or out of that conversation. But I think Baylor and West Virginia have kind of traded places, I guess is what I'm saying. Because now West
You'd have
Virginia
to think, though,
is,
Chris, even though Baylor may be kind of out of that conversation, probably still the team that's, really trying to impress upon their resume.
yes.
Right? I mean, going into this tip-off.
Yeah, can't take anything for granted
Yeah.
at this point. I think that's fair. I think can't take anything for granted. But I think Baylor's firmly in this tournament. I think now. I
Yeah.
think. I mean, being in the hotel lobby yesterday afternoon when West Virginia came back, there's a lot of
What was the vibe check there?
yeah. There was a lot of sad or you could just see it. Like West Virginia just felt like they'd been punched in the gut, and they had. I mean, Colorado just.
Was the Mountaineer dragging his musket? I hate to see a sad Mountaineer. Came back home without any dinner, honey.
Yeah, but
No rabbit
that's
stew.
that's where you're at. Is that's kind of what we have seen kind of be altered here. But I think for Texas Tech, I just
Yeah.
don't know what is. Again, you want to try to win because I've always said this, man. If you go to the conference tournament, if you win a game, it's been a successful trip. If you don't, it's not been successful. Now we will sit here and talk about how much rest you can get and how much you probably need if it doesn't go well tonight, and that's true. However, I just think that showing up here and winning a game would do yourself a lot of good just for a variety of reasons. So that's kind of where we're at. But again, I just want to impress upon everybody. It's not going to be easy. I mean, this Edgecombe kid is, if you haven't watched much, I mean, he's a problem. And so we'll just kind of see. It should be a great game if you're not rooting for either one of these two teams. You just want to watch. It should be a lot of good coaching and playing out there really throughout the day in KC today.
Oh, yeah. More weekday college basketball. Oh,
Day
I'm sorry to
sports.
see that your husband lost his job. He didn't. It's just March. He's watching weekday college basketball all day long. I'm curious about the availability report, and I guess Darion Williams is probably the biggest question to me, at least, at the top of that list. Are we talking guys that could be limited in action, or guys that could be in, sweatsuits, not even available for the day? What's this kind of conversation more like with that? And am I mistaken, or let's see, were we minus Darion Big 12 tournament last year, or who are we minus against?
No, well, what happened is that I think Warren Washington didn't play or was limited, and then you had a situation where Darion got hurt against BYU, and then
That's
he
what it
did
was.
not play the next day versus Houston, and so Emily Yalaho was having to, and you just had kind of run out at that point, and then probably the next week in Pittsburgh, you had all your pieces, but I don't know how good everything was with Warren and Darion Williams, and then you had a hot NC State team and whatnot. So yeah, and that's just the reality and kind of the game you're playing at this point. But this is and some kids will play to the environment. I mean, it's a juiced up electric atmosphere in this place. And what's weird is I think there'll be a lot of Kansas fans at your game because there are a ton of Kansas fans here, and there'll be a ton of Iowa State fans in the first set of quarterfinals. And who do they root for? Do they just root for good basketball? Are they rooting for somebody or against somebody? I'm not real sure, but
Should be us, of
uh,
course.
that's right.
Obviously.
But it will definitely be a situation where some guys will just play to the environment and embrace the atmosphere or the NBA type arena with a
Yeah.
with a neutral site feel to it. So we shall see soon enough.
Yeah. What are you going to root for? Baylor? Scott Drew? Ugh, appalling. So you expect everybody to be available going into this thing, and I guess depending on how the game plays out, everybody that has been available, I should say, and we'll see how it plays out as to what extent maybe they're utilized.
Yeah, I think Darion Williams is the only one I would have a question about, just because he was that was a weird dynamic in Tempe on Saturday. Gets dinged up, but then comes back in. I would assume he's after several days of rest. He didn't play last Saturday night, and it's now Thursday. That you'll get a dose of him. What percentage is he at? I'm not real sure, but even Grant McCaslin said everybody should be 100% as far as availability goes. Now, I think he was quick to say that's not. I'm not saying that they are all 100%, but we should have
Right.
100% availability. I think those are two different things.
Yeah.
But yeah, and that's we've touched on this, but that's what's been fascinating about this team and this journey is that you've been able to do this without pieces along the way, and they've all been like a different piece along every step of the way. I mean, you've had to figure it out. I'll tell you who I'm most interested to see. We've talked a lot about Baylor's stud freshmen, and they've got a couple of them, and Rob Wright, and then Edgecombe. But how does Christian Anderson handle this environment? I expect him to handle it great, like he's done everything else. But people probably aren't talking about him enough. And I think that he would have a chance to heavily impact this game tonight. And I, at some level, expect him to. What does that look like? Is that major or minor impact? It remains to be seen. But
Why do you say that?
he's
Is it a matchup thing or just a moment thing?
yes.
Fair enough.
I think he would be somebody that typically plays well in an environment like this, would run toward the fire, if you will, instead of running away from it, because this environment will make some kids nervous, or it'll be a packed house, and it's not like everybody's rooting for or against you. It's a different dynamic, and it's hard to explain it. But I also think because of how guard heavy that Baylor is, that he's going to need to impact the game, not just on defense, but with his ability to score and things like that. So I just think he's going to be a key piece for you tonight for sure.
Yeah, it seems like he's kind of progressed into, not that he was ever not running toward the fire in other areas, but I think the big shot aspect or the improbable shot aspect, if he's like, I don't know, channeling Steph Curry or something in some of these instances, that part of it offensively has kind of grown as the season has went along. I guess that's got to just be attributed, I guess, to growing confidence, maybe. I don't know. But some of the stuff, you watch him 3/4 of the season and you're thinking, this is pretty dang good. Well, I'll keep a whole lot more of this. And then he's, getting better, showing you even more than he did a few weeks ago. I can't wait to find out what March brings, but I don't know, man. It just seems like with that confidence growing that he still is continuing to find superpowers that maybe he didn't even know he held up to this point.
Well,
Are you seeing similar things?
I think he knows he's got these superpowers. Now, I don't know if he wants to run towards green flames coming out of manhole covers or anything
Be a
like
sick
that.
man to do that. What was
Yeah,
Baylor
like
up to in Lubbock yesterday? What a decoy distraction they were throwing our way.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of Baylor fans having some fun at Texas Tech's expense there. Glad that it appears nobody's hurt or anything, but that's a scary situation there. But back on campus, back at home. But yeah, I think Christian is somebody. He's a margin guy, and what I mean by that is
First, today's episode brought to you by TurboTax. Taxes was dealing with piles of paperwork and frustrating forms, and then waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back. Now, Taxes is easily uploading your forms to a TurboTax expert who's matched to your unique tax situation. An expert who's backed by the latest technology, which cross-checks millions of data points for 100% accuracy. And while they work on your taxes, you get real-time updates on their progress, and you get the most money back guaranteed. And while you go about your day, it's all happening with no stressing, no worrying, and no waiting. Now, this is Taxes with Intuit TurboTax. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live Full Service. Real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees.
I think Christian is somebody. He's a margin guy, and what I mean by that is that if he has one of these good games, it just increases your margin for error, and it makes you like it increases your upside as a team. When he doesn't, I think it limits in some ways what you can do because he's been biggest in some of your biggest games, and that's why I say that. I think, and the beautiful thing is he doesn't have to do this for you to be really good. We've seen some of those examples as well, but uh, as the year goes by, these freshmen are no longer freshmen anymore. They are grizzled vets. They've got a ton of experience under their belt. They will have seen these teams before, and everything else. But I expect him to continue to be a heavy part of what you're doing. As I said in one of those previous shows this week, it's just a comforting feeling when he comes up off the bench. You're like, oh yeah, like it has a chance to get better when you sub, not worse. And like, oh, hey, hold on, fellas, just wait for the starters to get a rest. No, actually has a chance to get better, and that's what he did in Tempe. I think he did the same thing in Lawrence, Kansas recently. So we'll kind of see what we get. The key thing though tonight is these two post players. If you cannot, when you get into the paint and you can't settle. Norshad Omier, as good as he is on the glass and it's scoring and whatnot, he is prone to fouling. He averages about three and a half fouls a game, and when he's in foul trouble, it changes who they are dramatically. And when he can't play or play to where he's got to like, oh, okay, I can't really foul you, so I'm gonna give you yours. So the JT and Omier kind of matchup is fascinating because I think you need to win that, even if it's just slightly. Because I think if you can get Omier into foul trouble and he can't play as many minutes or he can't impact the game on defense as much as he may want to, I think that could alter the course of this game. But because what you want to do is you want to make these guys take tough twos. There's a bunch of three-point shooters out there. They don't make on average as many threes as you, but that's without their starting center who's out for the year. It's Omier and four guards is kind of the way they roll with it, and they try to, like you do, try to get up a lot of threes. So you've got to guard the arc and then make Omier work, especially on defense, and make him pick up some fouls. So don't be soft inside because he will foul you. He's a phenomenal player. Again, this is the one that was supposed to potentially be in a Texas Tech uniform a few years ago. Came in on a visit, wanted to come here, didn't want a ton of money, and you chose differently. The previous staff chose Fardaz Amack instead, and Omier just has gone on to play in the Final Four for University of Miami, and now he's doing some serious damage for the Bears now.
And I'll allow some opportunity for everyone to remember for a quick second the achievements of Fardaz and his time in Lubbock. Okay, that's over. Chris, before we get out of here, we've talked so much about the impact of this type of tournament setting on the players and those guys on the floor. You ever seen head coaches shaken up by these types of settings, or adjust things or do things differently than they did in the regular season, maybe sometimes even to their detriment? What do you typically see on the sideline, or what do you expect out of Grant McCaslin in this type of setting?
Well, I tell you what's interesting. I'm glad you kind of bring that up. And this is part of what comes with the neutral court setting, and it's a good precursor to what you'll get when the real thing starts next week. But from now going forward, this game will be officiated differently. There is no home crowd to appease. There's no so they typically let guys play a bit more. It's not as much of a ticky tack type game that the way it's called. I mean, it's a little more physical. I don't know whether that's good or bad for you, because I mean, again, where you're sitting here talking about trying to get Omer in foul trouble, you don't want JT Toppin in foul trouble, and that's kind of been tricky for you at various times throughout the season. But coaches may have to work harder, or their words may be more hollow to officials on a neutral court setting. And I think that is kind of the game within the game type situation. These are typically longer games. The media timeouts are longer. So there's a lot more rest in between these segments of the game because of the way it's televised, and because and that'll be the same way with the NCAAs as well. So I think that you just talk to your players about 3 to 4 minute spurts. 3 to 4 minute spurts, and just keep winning those repeatedly, and then you'll like the result. But it allows for a smaller rotation, which both of these teams are only going to go 7 or 8 deep anyways, just because of a bit of an extra rest and all that. And then typically not having to deal with as much foul trouble in normal situations. It doesn't mean that somebody doesn't foul out, or it doesn't mean that you won't pick up 2 quick ones or something. It's not what I'm trying to say. I just think, generally speaking, they let a little bit more go on in these things. They're not going to get talked into a call by the coach or the crowd, because the crowd is neutral, in a lot of cases.
Yeah, man, can't wait to find out how it goes down. And for better or worse, it will mean we're one step closer to the big dance. So that's going to be good news regardless. Chris, enjoy the ball game. Appreciate your time today from Kansas City. I think I'm rooting for you to get another day or two. I got to be honest. I know you're probably missing Lubbock, missing home, missing our Green Flames, missing the family, all that stuff. But I'd kind of like you to hang around maybe for a little while longer, and let's go ahead and get a win tonight.
Yeah, no doubt. I would love to be here for a few more days, without a doubt. I think these wins could potentially pay some dividends for you. But you've done enough this year to where if it doesn't go well, I think you're going to be just fine. Yeah, and if you're in the USA tonight, should they still hold that concert, I hope somebody sings Neon Moon for me really loud back there at home with the boys, Brooks and Dunn there at the old LBK tonight. So.
That's right. I had to alert my wife early on to the fact that when it plays, we get out of our seats and we dance in our family. And I guess tonight, though, it'll be a little bit awkward. I'll pause for a moment. I'll look into her eyes and tell her I'm thinking about Chris Level right now, if only for a moment, just for you, Chris.
There you go. I appreciate it.
Plenty of members of the Locked On Texas Tech fam family at the USA, if it's not overtaken by Green Flame. So be on the lookout for that as well. A&M painting a horse once upon a time, UT capturing a steer, whatever it might have happened. This is too far, Baylor. I mean, just shave our livestock or something like that. I think the Green Chemical Flame a little much, but that's just me. These kids in 2025, they are wild. For Chris, I'm Casey. Thanks for being out there. We appreciate you. As always, hope to see you back for the next round on Locked On Texas Tech.